Hi guys, this is Connie, back for some more Connie Reads White Fragility. This is chapter 4, and because I didn't look it up, we're either on section 3 or section 4, or was that section 4, and now this is section 5. It'll be in the title. We are doing the next subsection. So chapter 4 is How Does Race Shape the Lives of White People? This next section is called White Racial Innocence. Here we go. Because we are not raised to see ourselves in racial terms or to see white space as racialized space, we position ourselves as innocent of race. On countless occasions, I have heard white people claim that because they grew up in segregation, they were sheltered from race. At the same time, we turn to people of color who may have also grown up in racially segregated spaces, in parentheses, because of decades of de jure and de facto policies that blocked them from moving into white neighborhoods, parentheses. At the same time, we turn to people of color who may have grown up in racially segregated spaces to learn about racism. But why aren't people of color who grew up in segregation also innocent of race? I ask my readers to reflect deeply on the idea that white segregation is I ask my readers to reflect deeply on the idea that white segregation is racially innocent. Because people of color are not seen as racially innocent, they are expected to speak to issues of race, but must do so on white terms, it says in parentheses. This idea that racism is not a white problem enables us to sit back and let people of color take very real risks of invalidation and retaliation as they share their experiences. But we are not required to take similar cross-racial risks. They, not we, have race, and thus they are holders of racial knowledge. In this way, we position ourselves as standing outside hierarchical social relations. Wow, I cannot say hierarchical social relations. There we go. In this way, we position ourselves as standing outside of hierarchical social relations. It's so not right. White flight may be seen as another aspect of white racial innocence, as it is often justified by beliefs that people of color, in parentheses, again, especially Black people, are more prone to crime, and that if too many Black people move into a neighborhood, crime will increase, home values will go down, and the neighborhood will deteriorate. For example, in a study of race and perceptions of crime conducted by sociologists Heather Johnson and Thomas Shapiro, white families consistently discuss fear of crime and associated crime with people of color. In their minds, the more people of color in an area, specifically Blacks and Latinos, it says in parentheses, the more dangerous the area was perceived to be. Research matching census data and police department crime statistics show that this association does not hold, but these statistics do quell white fears. For most whites, the percentage of young men of color in a neighborhood is directly correlated with perceptions of the neighborhood crime level. Ouch. Deeply held white associations of Black people with crime distort reality and the actual direction of danger that has historically existed between whites and Blacks. The vast history of extensive and brutal, explicit violence perpetrated by whites and their ideological rationalizations are all trivialized through white claims of racial innocence. The power we now wield, and have wielded for centuries, is thus obscured. It has been well documented that Blacks and Latinos are stopped by police more often than whites are for the same activities, and that they receive harsher sentences than whites do for the same crimes. Research has also shown that a major reason for this racial disparity can be attributed to the beliefs held by judges and others about the cause of the criminal behavior. For example, the criminal behavior of white juveniles is often seen as caused by external factors, The youth comes from a single-parent home, is having a hard time right now, just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, or was bullied at school. Attributing the cause of the action to external factors lessens the person's responsibility and classifies that person as a victim. But Black and Latinx youth, or Latinx youth, are not afforded this same compassion. When Black and Latinx youth go before a judge, the cause of the crime is more often attributed to something internal to the person. The youth is naturally more prone to crime, is more animalistic, and has less capacity for remorse. And in parentheses it says, similarly, a 2016 study found that half of a sample of medical students and residents believe that Blacks feel less pain. Whites continually receive the benefit of the doubt not granted to people of color. Our race alone helps establish our innocence. For those of us who work to raise the racial consciousness of whites, simply getting whites to acknowledge that our race gives us advantages is a major effort. The defensiveness, denial, and resistance are deep, but acknowledging advantage is only a first step, and this acknowledgement can be used in a way that renders it meaningless and allows us white people to exempt ourselves from further responsibility. For example, I have often heard whites dismissively say, just because of the color of my skin, I have privilege. Statements like this describe privilege as if it's a fluke, something that just happens to us as we move through life with no involvement or complicity on our part. Complicity on our part. Critical race scholar Zeus Leonardo critiques the concept of white privilege as something white people receive unwittingly. He says that this concept is words that I don't know how to read. Analogous to suggesting that a person could walk through life with other people stuffing money into their pockets without any awareness or consent on the walker's part. Leonardo challenges this conceptualization with positions white privilege. I'm not saying this in a way that makes sense. I'm going to start this paragraph all over. Critical race scholar Zeus Leonardo critiques the concept of white privilege as something white people receive unwittingly. He says that this concept is analogous to suggesting that a person could walk through life with other people stuffing money into their pockets without any awareness or consent on the walker's part. Leonardo challenges this conceptualization, which positions white privilege as innocence, by arguing that, quote, for white racial hegemony to saturate everyday life, it has to be secured by a process of domination, or those acts, decisions, and policies that white subjects perpetuate on people of color, unquote. Viewing privilege as something that white people are just handed obscures the systematic dimensions of racism that must be actively and passively, consciously and unconsciously maintained. The expectation that people of color should teach white people about racism is another aspect of white racial innocence that reinforces several problematic racial assumptions. First, it implies that racism is something that happens to people of color and has nothing to do with us, and that we consequently cannot be expected to have any knowledge of it. This framework denies that racism is a relationship in which both groups are involved. By leaving it to people of color to tackle racial issues, we offload the tensions and social dangers of speaking openly onto them. We can ignore the risks ourselves and remain silent on questions of our own culpability. Second, this request requires nothing of us and reinforces unequal power relations by asking people of color to do our work. There are copious resources available on the subject generated by people of color who are willing to share the information. Why haven't we sought it out before this conversation? Good question. Third, the request ignores the historical dimensions of race relations. It disregards how often people of color have indeed tried to tell us what racism is like for them and how often they have been dismissed. To ask people of color to tell us how they experience racism without first building a trusting relationship and being willing to meet them halfway by also being vulnerable shows that we are not racially aware and that this exchange will probably be invalidating for them. That's the end of that section. And the next section is pretty long, so I think we're going to save that one for the next upload on Thursday. So be careful with that and enjoy, please, and thank you. And I hope you loved. I'm going to have to look up analogous. I think it's analogous. Just never heard that word before. I'll see you for the next upload. Have a great one.